we are trying to understand what philosophy is. There are different ways people understand philosophy. One way to understand what philosophy is to understand what philosophers do. What makes philosophers different from people around them? Let's say they ask questions. What kind of questions do philosophers ask that makes them different from other people? Do they ask a set of questions that are different, or do they ask questions in different way? One primary task of the philosopher is to challenge the presuppositions of people. They would question our beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about the society. Socrates used to call himself as a gadfly, a fly that stings, wakes people up from their sleep. A philosopher is one who challenges existing systems, practices, concepts, etc. So, do philosophers ask different questions? Yes, to a certain extent, they do ask questions that ordinarily people do not spend much time upon. What kind of questions do they ask? Philosophers ask questions about self, others, life, world, anything under the sky, and often above the sky or about the sky, which means there is nothing that cannot be subjected to questioning, critical reasoning within philosophy. Within the domain of philosophy, there is nothing that is sacred, which means nothing that cannot be questioned. So anything and everything can become a matter of questioning for philosophers. And one thing to understand is that they may find problems and questions where ordinary people do not find any problems. Philosophers probably take upon themselves as a moral task to find problems where there seem to be none. We live happily, normally, thinking we know many things. We know things sufficiently so that we can lead a very normal life. Sometimes, maybe we are also disturbed. We ask certain questions once in a while in life, like, what is the meaning of life? Why should I be alive? What should I be doing? Why is this society like this? When did this world begin and when will it end? What is after the world ends? Or what was there before the world began? Or rather, was there a beginning at all? How big is the universe? Does it have a boundary? Is democracy the right practice of governance? Or is there some other better way of governing people? Where do the rulers derive their authority from? What are numbers? Sometimes, even maybe while reading a book with a philosophical touch, or sitting alone or a beautiful place, we might ask some of these questions. Or, interestingly, when we are depressed. But then, when the situations change, when situations become different, we forget about these questions and start asking other more important practical questions in life, like, what should I post today on the social media? How should I respond to this person? What should I be doing in the office tomorrow? Right, we too ask questions. But philosophers are probably those people who spend their whole life asking these questions. When we stop asking certain questions, or we ask certain questions only when under some state of mind or in a particular situation, philosophers take extra pains not to forget these questions. They are governed by the sense of wonder or curiosity which we would see in children. Small children, whatever they see newly, or even the same thing, they are wonder-struck. They are curious to know what it is, who this is, how this works. They are inquisitive. And maybe we could say philosophers are those people who do not let that sense of wonder and curiosity to never die. They do not let those questions pass away. They hold on to these questions, trying to dig deeper and understand what the real issue is. When we know something is not right, we think about it for a while and then we leave it. But philosophers are people who go deep into the problem, into the sense of there being something wrong or something unclear, putting extra effort to understand what is that which is not fitting in here. And this is not done for a minute or two, for a day or two, until they are satisfied. Satisfied doesn't mean that they get a satisfactory answer. They get to know, rather, what is the problem. So a philosopher is a person who takes extra effort, extra pain to find, to identify, to clarify problems, questions, where there seems to be none. Probably that is why Nietzsche said, in the presence of a philosopher, everything is under the threat of falling apart. We ordinary people live happily, thinking things are quite normal. Everything is perfect. Like, I know who I am. I know why the world is this way. I know what the society is doing. I know what the politicians should do. And I know when justice is not done. I know what is a truth to be followed. Though we do not become conscious of these things, we live as if we know answers, we have answers to these issues or concepts. But philosophers, as I said, philosophers take extra pain to make us aware that we do not have answers to these problems. Probably we do not understand these concepts and practices or beliefs which we otherwise seem to understand, seem to digest. So, why people normally do not ask questions of this kind? Because it would make normal living difficult. When you start asking these kind of questions, going forward becomes difficult. For example, when your moral science teacher tells you or your parent tells you that you should always speak the truth, the children in front of the teacher says, "Yes sir, yes ma'am, we shall." But if there is a small philosopher in that group, she would get up and raise a few questions to the teacher probably. Questions like, what is truth? Is there one truth or many truths? Is there universal truths? Is my truth same as your truth? And why should I be truthful at all? Can I be untruthful once in a while? If it is beneficial to me or to others. So, a philosopher, a person with a philosophical inclination, is a person who refuses to accept what is told. Not because he or she doesn't like to accept, but he or she is not easily convinced. It takes time for them to understand in a deep way what is being told and to decide whether to accept it or not. So, philosophers are people who raise concerns, questions, where normally people do not find any problems. They do challenge our presuppositions, our knowledge, our beliefs, our opinions, our practices, our concepts. They frustrate us. They challenge us to think, to question. And if someone is able to identify certain problems within a system or a problem about oneself, about the society, about the state, about the world, that itself is a great action. It is due to such people that human societies have made progress. Now, the responsibility to find answers to these questions, does that belong to the philosopher? Do philosophers have the responsibility to find answers to the problems that they raise? Probably no. Identifying problems, issues, and asking them in a very systematic way, clarifying the issues, why they think that there is something wrong with this concept, there is something wrong with this practice, that itself might be a great contribution. Philosophers, by the word meaning, means the seekers of knowledge, seekers of wisdom, lovers of wisdom. So, wisdom does not come unless you question things, unless you try to understand things deeper. So, giving answers may not be the primary task of philosophers. They are inviting everyone to see that there is a problem. They are challenging everyone to understand the problem and find solutions to that. And he or she also does that. And if the philosopher is capable of, or if the philosopher is able to arrive at a solution, the second task of the philosopher happens. That is, to present the solution or the philosopher's position in front of other philosophers. That's what probably academic philosophers do while they publish papers in journals or books. They publish their findings, their position, and that is not an easy task. It has to be supported by sound arguments, sufficient reasons. The solution or the position is now before other people or other thinkers to judge. It's not, the philosopher does not speak what he thinks like, what he feels like. He or she presents a solution or a position when she or he is convinced, after persistent thinking about it, after considerable amount of time is spent on understanding the problem. And that comes, the solution or the position comes with substantive body of arguments and reasons. The second part of the philosopher's task is to present his or her positions for other thinkers to evaluate. Then the third step comes after other people have thought about the position sufficiently, after they have raised certain concerns about the position, after they have made critique about the solutions offered by the first thinker, the third task of the philosopher begins. That is, to respond to the critique of other thinkers. The philosopher may be forced to accept the critique of other people and improve her own position, or to change one's own position, or adapt or to modify their own position. But that person has to respond. And that begins the process of dialectics. The new solution becomes a matter of critical analysis. A new solution, a new position comes up. And subsequently, that becomes the subject matter of critical reasoning. The process goes on. So, this is what probably a philosopher does. Questioning. Finding problems and issues where ordinarily people do not find any issues. And thereby challenging people to think, to understand deeper the concepts, the issues. And in this process, they bring clarity to our concepts, our beliefs, our practices. We, the other people who follow the philosophers, also start looking at life differently, because maybe it is proven to them that what they believed previously was false. So things are not to be taken for granted. Things are to be approached with a critical mindset. This is what philosophers challenge people to do. This is what their contribution to the society is. Constant challenging, constant questioning about oneself, about the world, about the society, about our traditions, practices, about everything that we take for granted, about everything that we thought once was perfectly normal. They challenge us to look at life differently. So, one way to understand what philosophy is, or what happens within the discipline of philosophy, or what is to philosophize, is to understand what philosophers actually do. And that is constant questioning. Keeping alive the sense of wonder, inquisitiveness, the feeling of curiosity, and never to accept things without subjecting it to critical analysis. Never to accept beliefs and opinions without subjecting them to rigorous analysis. This is what philosophers do, and they challenge others to do.